All righty. Welcome everyone to this podcast. Today we have an awesome guest. This is Jim Estill of Danby Appliances. So Jim, a little bit about Jim. He started his business from the trunk of his car and grew it to $2 billion in sales. So he retired, but he didn't want to stay retired. So he bought Danby Appliances, where he is now the acting CEO. Now, Jim is a prolific investor. He's with backing over 150 startup companies, including BlackBerry, where he was he was a founding board member and served for 13 years at BlackBerry. So Jim has been awarded EI Entrepreneur of the Year, winner in Ontario, the Order of Ontario, and Order of Canada. And he's received on-air degrees from the Humber College, University of Guelph, as well as the University of Waterloo. So we're super excited and privileged to have Jim join us today. So without further ado, welcome, Jim. Thank you for coming.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yes. So as we've had a bit of a discussion earlier, and we're excited to talk about your journey, your adversity, your resilience, and all the things that you had experienced and gone through to get to where you are. Well, I'm excited. So let's start with the first question. And this is a big question. So take us back, Jim. Take us back to the beginning. What's the story? Tell us how you actually got started here, right? So you have a huge career. We want to know what your very first real sale was. So tell me a little bit about that.
So I am an engineer, systems design engineer, and I wanted to design circuit boards. But to design circuit boards, I needed a computer, and back then computers were expensive. I got a better deal if I bought two of them. So I bought two of them, and this is my first sale. I sold one of them. So I sold one of them, and then someone else wanted one, so I bought another two, and then someone wanted a printer, and then someone wanted a disk drive, and then someone wanted a memory. So next thing you know, I'm buying and selling computer hardware, software, and peripherals. And I'm not in the computer circuit board design business. I'm in the computer sales business, although I did actually keep doing the circuit design business for a few years and spun that out into a different business, but that's a different story.
Wow. So you started by selling, it all started by selling a computer board.
Exactly.
Wow. So, and you were a trained systems engineer. So,
Yes, I sold it while I was in my final year of university.
okay. So was this kind of like just a side hustle? You didn't even expect to, like, tell us about this. How did you even get it? Like, how did you even decide that that's something you want to sell?
Well, I basically I wanted to buy this expensive computer, and I'm a poor student who don't have enough money, and I learned that if I bought two, I'd get a discount. So I bought two and sold one, and that was how I helped pay for the one that I had wanted. And then other people at that time just wanted computers, and I was passionate about computers, and I went to the user group meetings and I talked computer lingo, and so I attracted a bunch of computer nerds who started buying stuff from me, and that's how I started, and that's why it's from the trunk of my car, because at that time my trunk was the most secure place I had to store stuff. And the computers are fairly small, fairly high value. And back then, trunks of cars were big. And eventually, I grew that business to a couple billion in sales.
That's incredible. Yeah. Trunks of cars could even be safe now. They can't be hacked from across the world, right?
That's right.
Alrighty. That's pretty cool. Okay. Well, I mean, things have changed, right? So looking at your business today, looking back and looking now, what does growth mean to you? Is it about revenue? Is it about market share, team size, something else? What does growth mean to you, Jim?
Well, growth is in business is normally measured in revenue, but I'm a business person, so it also has to be measured in profit, and often team size ties to revenue. The reason I like growth is growth gives opportunity to people, and growth allows us to drive efficiencies into a business. So if we grow by 10%, we likely don't add 10% more warehouse space. We likely don't even add 10% more staff. We don't add 10% more overhead. And we don't pay 10% more heat and electricity. So growth allows efficiencies to be driven in, and it also allows me to give opportunity to people.
Makes sense. Now, we're in a time where growth is tough, right? Especially with tariffs. Maybe you're not affected by it, maybe you are, with competition. And a lot of times sales teams, let's be honest, they were riding on the gravy train. A lot of companies were very successful with their salespeople just basically taking orders. I don't assume that was you, but a lot of companies that might have been similar to yours, they were very successful with their salespeople just kind of handling leads, taking orders, and fulfilling those orders, and that's great. So, how is that kind of the same thing that's going on with your business now, or do the salespeople need to take more of a proactive role?
Well, when there's a shortage of supply, then you just take orders.
Hmm.
And when the market's expanding rapidly, then you can just take orders. But you're right. We're now in a challenging business time, so you have to fight for every order. That means you need to be aggressive, persistent, and add value to your customers because that's why they're going to buy from you. You have to build their belief in that you actually are going to deliver a better product at a fairer price.
Absolutely. And no doubt, you do have a value proposition that a lot of different companies don't have, right?
Absolutely. I mean,
Mhm.
anyone who's in business has to have a value proposition, or else they wouldn't be in business. And we
Right.
wouldn't be selling 2 million appliances a year if we didn't have some reason why people buy those 2 million appliances.
Right.
And part of the job in business is to try to make those reasons better and stronger so that more people want to buy those.
Absolutely. And, oftentimes companies, whether they're small, medium, large like yours, their salespeople, they have a group of people that are doing a fantastic job at communicating their value to the buyer in ways that actually resonate with the buyer. But on the flip side, and I don't assume this is you, Jim, they're successful growing companies, but the leaders believe that their salespeople are not communicating their value in ways that resonate with the prospect or buyer, either because the salesperson knows their value, they're just not communicating effectively, or they don't know their value, so they're not communicating it effectively to the buyer. So oftentimes, what salespeople do is they think it all comes down to price. They believe in their mind that the sale comes down to price. So they think that, because they're not effectively communicating value in a way that resonates, they got a discount to get the sale. So what happens is in the buyer's eyes, because they're not communicating that value effectively and efficiently, the buyer just looks at them as a commodity. They just see, hey, what's the difference between you and the other guys? So I want to get the cheapest price. And it rarely comes down to money. It's just because the salesperson was not effectively and efficiently communicating their value. So, no doubt your people, are kind of really honing in on that and effective at communicating their value. Otherwise, you wouldn't be growing at a significant rate, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't have a value, then you can't sell.
Mhm.
And
Right.
and value is not just price. If value is just price, then I'd be buying all my food at the dollar store, and I don't.
That's right. Totally. Alrighty. Thank you. So that being said, when you look at your vision for sales in the next 3 to 5 years, each of those years, year one, year two, year three, year four, year five, what is your vision in each of those years for the next 5 years when it comes to sales and selling?
Well, there's several sales are very subtle. So part of it is influenced by external environment. So what is going to go on with tariffs? What's going to go on with the
Mhm.
economy? Um, what's going to go on with product? Are there trends that are going to affect the products? Um, and of course, the other thing that's impacting all of us is AI. And what
Mhm.
impact does that have on sales and the sales approach and the customers and where does that go and whatnot. And we're just at the early days of that. So I believe that is going to be an impact. As an entrepreneur, I always say that change is opportunity. And so I see a lot of change. And that is just an opportunity. We just have to figure out where our niche is and where we're going to be able to capitalize on whatever those changes may be. So I like change. If it's just status quo, then you can't grow as
Absolutely.
easily.
Totally. Yeah, there's lots of changes. And it's funny that you mentioned AI because, there's a lot of businesses that are really investing in AI. Companies with sales teams, they're really investing in AI. But at the end of the day, what about the people that are not investing in their salespeople, in their sales team process? Because people still want to work with a human being. A lot of companies, especially kind of the younger generation, the company owners who have younger generation in their sales departments, they keep telling the sales leaders, "Oh, we got to have a bigger digital footprint. We have to spend more on marketing, more on AI." And they think that, sending some messages or some letters out through an email or a campaign, they think that's enough. But if you look at the top performing companies, they are heavily supporting the ability of their salespeople to initiate buyer focused conversations with buyers rather than just depending on the advancement of AI. This isn't totally part of one of the questions, but it kind of just got me thinking, Jim. What do you think about that? What do you think about the companies that are putting too much investment in AI and not enough investment in the development of their people and the development of the sales skills of their people? Is that relevant in your world at all? You probably are investing. You probably have a lot of support for your salespeople. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing that much in sales a year.
Well, I actually think that AI means you need to invest more in people. And the reason you need to invest more in people is it is a change. And I think of AI not as a substitute for salespeople. I think of it as a tool that some salespeople will use. Just like Google was a tool that you use when the internet comes out, you use Google to find out more background. So before you meet with someone, you've looked at their LinkedIn profile and you've Googled how many stores they have, and you know more about the customer. AI, it just allows you to do that. The other thing that happens when you have new technology, sometimes you have bad use of technology, and that's what you're talking about a little bit is
Mhm.
bad use of technology. But those companies get weeded out, and others will not. And I do believe there still will need to be a human touch, and the companies that have human, like real people, will thrive more. I know
Absolutely.
it's not specifically AI, but when I call my bank with a problem, I really don't like not being able to talk to a person and being told to go to the website. And the reason I'm calling is because you can't do it on the website because otherwise I wouldn't call because I know how to use the website and whatnot. And we've all been in that press
Oh, yeah.
1, press 5, press 7, press 9, oops, I've pressed the wrong one. I have to start over again.
Yep. Or these chat bots where oftentimes they're very effective, but you're on a website and you're talking to a chat bot. You keep answering the question 17 different times and they just keep, you know, asking you to select a different category and you've already done that and it just drives you nuts. You just want to pick up the phone and make a dial so that you can talk to someone, right?
That's right. But what you want to do is use technology to eliminate the mundane.
Mhm.
So I don't want you to buy a freezer from me and call me to say, how do I plug it in? I
Right.
want to have it so that the freezer is intuitive enough that you know to plug it in. Maybe that's a bad example. Um,
No, it's okay.
and so the more you can, but where I do want you to call me is to say, "Oh, I have a problem. I need to. I'm opening a new location. I need more freezer space. Do you have one that's this tall or that tall?" But bottom line is, it is a tool that allows salespeople to do what is higher value work than simply doing things that the computer can do. Like I always say with Google, I don't need to memorize the names of all the states and the
Mhm.
capitals of all the states. You don't need
Yeah,
to memorize because I've got Google to do that. But there are other things which are good for me to know. And so,
totally. Yeah. So bottom line, listen up, everyone. AI is not the only way. Your data is not the only thing. You still need to invest in your people and the professional development of your people. There
all
you go.
right.
Okay, well, I mean, on that note, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your commitment to your vision of AI and, maybe you can't really control external influences, but what is your vision, commitment to that vision of investing in AI and your people in the coming years?
Well, I
Commitment.
believe in investing. If our company doesn't use AI appropriately, then our competitors will, and we will
Mm,
lose. So business is a competitive issue, and the same thing is true with salespeople. If my salespeople aren't as good as the other salespeople across the street, then the person you'll be interviewing next year is the person across the street, and not me. So you
sure.
need to have, and we're in a competitive. We're Everyone is in a competitive business, and even if your competition might not be a direct same product, you're competing for dollars.
Mhm.
So in your business, you may be talking training dollars, but the training dollars might come out of the marketing budget. Like they might not spend the money on marketing and spend it on training, and they might not spend it on another salesperson, and so everything is a trade-off for everything else.
Lots of moving parts. You gotta stay constantly on top of it, and ideally, there's a system to streamline everything so that you're not kind of left walking in the dark wondering where you're going, a GPS, so to speak, on,
Yep.
next steps. Yeah, totally. Okay, cool. Alrighty. So actually, let's talk about how you are generating leads in your business now. Most people have heard of Danby. I sure have. A lot of people have seen it everywhere, right? So what's working best for generating new leads for you right now, and how is that different from when you started?
Well, see, a company like Danby, we tend to have repeat sales, and we're selling to the same customers over and over again. So we're selling to Costco, and we're selling to Home Depot, and we're selling to Canadian Tire. We're selling to the same customers over and over again.
Hmm.
So there's not that much prospecting. To the extent that there's prospecting, it's trying to. I'm doing a podcast to talk to 1,000 of your listeners because 1,000 listeners hear the word Danby and say, "Oh, maybe I should be favorably predisposed when I see Danby on the shelf."
Hmm.
Um, but we don't do that much prospecting, or to the extent that we do, we're prospecting within our customers.
Hmm.
So I always say when you're selling to a Costco, you don't just sell to the buyer. You need to make sure the store managers are happy. You need to make sure the president's happy. You need to make sure their logistics people are happy. You need to make sure their service people are happy. It's multi pronged. You need to prospect within the clients is more our type of prospecting than going out to find a new lead, because I doubt that there's a retail chain that you could tell us about that we haven't heard of, if that makes
Totally.
sense.
Makes total sense. So that being said, is it fair to say that, there is a pretty big onus or hope for the salespeople to be effective and efficient at expanding business within your existing, dealer base?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's multiple ways to grow a business. One is to increase the number of products you sell to the same customers. The
Mhm.
other is to increase the number of products you sell to those customers. Um, and so that's the job of the sales people, is to get us more listings and get us on the floor and more Leons and more bricks and more Best Buys.
Totally. And probably this is probably not something that you face, but a lot of people, with sales teams, they have salespeople that say do a great job servicing accounts, but when it comes to proactively expanding the business that they're doing with their existing customers and accounts, the senior leaders are like wondering why they're not. Like for instance, they're not going in, they're not starting conversations with their existing customers to find out if they are facing any other problems, concerns, related to your product or service, and ask questions about those concerns, which could actually open up the door to new opportunities. But because they're not initiating that conversation with the existing customer client and asking if they're facing any problems, they're missing out on massive opportunities within their existing customer and account base. So, you may be a lot of people that they notice that the people that are in sales, maybe they're doing a good job, but they also have a group of customer service reps or account reps who they are not in sales, but because they're dealing with the customer directly, they have a very strong relationship with them, maybe even stronger than the salesperson. So if they could just figure out a way to get their customer service reps to at least recognize these cross sell or upsell opportunities, so that they could actually refer it to the salesperson. A lot of senior leaders truly believe that that would make a huge increase in revenue or profitability. Now, your team, customer service team's probably doing a pretty good job at that already. If is that relevant in your world at all?
Well, the one issue salespeople have is they tend to do what's comfortable. And one saying that I repeat often is successful people or successful companies do tough things. So it means we need to do the tough things. If
Mm-hmm.
the salesperson, it wants to expand business, you probably have to talk to somebody that you're not talking to now. You probably have to think more creatively. You probably have to present differently. If you just go to the customers that are happy to see you and offer you coffee, then you're not going to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, there's always tendency over time for everything to dwindle and become less and less. So
Absolutely.
keeping pushing at the edges. Successful people do tough things. Successful companies do tough things, and that's what I say when I have to wake
Mhm.
up at 4 o'clock in the morning to catch a flight. Well, I'm a successful person, so I'll do the tough things.
That's right. Nothing worth it comes easy, right?
Yeah.
Alrighty, thank you. So, and would you say that you've basically maintained that same mindset from when you first started, or do you think it's evolved where you are now?
Everything has always evolved. So it has evolved more. I've gotten more mature and I've learned. Um, and as we've talked about earlier in the conversation, sometimes sales periods are a little easier than other times. So
Hmm.
you learn during the tough times
That's right.
that you have to do tougher things, where other times, I run a business, and sometimes what happens is you have not enough production capacity for the sales, and other times you don't have enough sales for the production capacity,
Hmm.
and you're always trying to balance the two. More often than not, it's pushing the sales, and then the production has to figure out how do you keep up with the salespeople.
Totally. Absolutely. They got to work in tandem, right?
That's right.
Alrighty. Very well. Thank you. So, every business, as we know, they have a bit of a messy middle. Now, can you share, Jim, a time when a deal, a new hire, or a strategy didn't go to your plan and what you learned from it?
Well, my first business, I was selling computers, and they were technical, and I'm an engineer. So I hired a bunch of technical people, and we used to have quizzes. How much memory does this have? How fast is this? What's the feature function? And we hired a new sales rep who came from Pitney Bowes, and we used to do quizzes. And he didn't pass the quizzes. He was doing I thought the guy's never going to last. He doesn't
Mhm,
know the speeds and feeds and the technical on our product, because we're a bunch of techie nerd engineers.
mhm.
And then his sales went up next month, and then he's still not getting it. This guy's not going to last. And then his sales went up, and then his sales went up. And what do you mean you're going out to the kid's birthday party on Friday night? What are you doing? Doing um, delivering coffee to the customer on their way to work. And next thing you know, I learned from that there's more than one way to sell, and his personal approach to selling worked better even than the technical approach to selling, which was for us to know all our speeds and feeds.
Totally, yeah. So, how are you dealing with current states where, people are not doing the creative things, not building the rapport, not reaching out to people. I don't assume that you have this issue, but let's say you did hypothetically had a group of people that were not proactively reaching out to customers when they could or should. They're not proactively asking the questions to customers when they could or should. How do you manage that? Like, you got a lot of hats to wear, like, in only a limited amount of time. So how are you managing and holding people accountable for that type of proactive behavior and, and reinforcing it,
Well,
continuously?
well, the job of sales management is to patch up your sales force. So what happens is they go out and they get kicked in the knee all day, and then they come back to the office, and you need to patch them up and send them out so they can get kicked in the shins the next day.
Mhm.
Because very successful salespeople don't make the sale in 70% of the cases or 80% of the cases. They make the call and they don't get they don't get the order right away. So one of the
Mhm.
jobs of sales management is that um, coach, train, and mentor and bring them up. One trick that doesn't work bad is reporting usually works as well. So I say if you
Mhm.
can't hit your sales number, you can definitely hit your activity number. So if you've called
Okay.
on your 50 accounts, okay, it means you're doing the job. If you don't make the sales and you're not calling on the 50 accounts, and I can tell you why you're not making your sales because you didn't call on the 50 accounts. Of
That's
course,
great.
not everything can be perfectly statistical and perfect by the numbers because I could make 50 calls and be rude and um,
Yeah.
obnoxious and not make the sale because I haven't got the right sales approach. But that's a different story because, as you know, sales is extremely subtle. It's not black and white. It's not totally a science. It's more of an art. And the way you buy is different than the way I buy. And we all tend to sell to people the way we buy as opposed to the way they buy.
I totally agree. So what let me get this straight. So you're telling me that, it's not always about tracking outcomes. That's maybe the outcomes, yeah, they matter, but you can't really control that. But what you can control is your behavior. Did you
That's
do
right.
the dials? Did you make the calls? You can't control where that call goes. But the fact that you are actively doing the behavior, that's you can control that, and that's a massive piece. So,
You-
what would you say to companies that are too dependent on outcomes and not dependent enough on tracking their business development behavior? What would you say to them?
I think the only companies that can be completely successful only tracking the outcome are ones with a tremendously short sell cycle and tremendously short term window. But most
Mhm.
successful businesses are long term. I don't hang up here and make a call and make a sale. That's not the way it works in our industry.
Mhm.
You make the call, present the product, plant the seed, help the customer. Next week you make another call. Next week after that you make another call. And then you send them something, and then you see them at a trade show, and then you help them some other way. And the next thing you know, you get the order 3 months later, six
Mhm.
months later. So you're often in sales planting seeds and nurturing those seeds rather than instantly making the sale because products I'm involved in, nobody just makes a sale by making a single call, or rarely does it happen that way.
Totally. And people in sales, they're used to getting beat up. They're used to getting no's. They're used to getting, rejections. That's just part of the game. So, one of the acronyms that we use here in Sandler is BAT, and that stands for behavior, attitude, and technique. So these are all extremely important, if not all equally as important elements. Because let's say you're doing the behavior, but you have a crappy attitude or don't have the technique, it's going to be really tough. Or let's say you do have the technique and do have the attitude, but you're not doing the behavior. Well, logically, you're just not going to hit your results. Or let's say you have the behavior and the technique, but your attitude is not good. You're going to be stressed out and burnt out. It's not going to be a pretty sight for you. So, how do you maintain or support the morale of the staff, especially in times like now where they may have to prospect harder than they did to their existing customer base? How do you ensure that they remain positive and optimistic when they're doing the behavior?
Well, one way to do it is celebrate behaviors not necessarily just the outcome or the
Mm,
instant outcome. And so one way is through celebration,
right,
and it's celebration and recognition. So
right.
and it's coach, train, and mentor. Your
Mhm,
attitude, I think, can be also people follow your lead and your example. Um, so follow the attitude if that I have. I mean, I tend to be a very optimistic, upbeat type person, but that doesn't mean not seeing reality.
mhm,
So there is a reality here. I mean, tariffs are real, and
yeah,
this is impacting the economy, and this
yeah,
is real. So it doesn't mean it's totally rose-colored glasses. It's just saying yes, but that means there's going to be some opportunities here that we didn't previously have, and how are we going to capitalize on them?
yeah, absolutely. So the fact is, yes, there's tariffs, and yes, it's making it harder to sell. That's a fact. But your attitude is a complete opinion. Like you could either have the opinion of, oh, I'm wasting time, this isn't working, and you're not going to do the behavior. Or you could have the attitude of, oh, there's a huge opportunity here. We just need to figure out and get more creative in how we initiate these buyer focused conversations with existing clients. And, this is the perfect time to swoop in and help people. Right. So it's a constant kind of battle or, maintaining equilibrium. But when it comes to technique, of the salespeople. A lot of people they're doing a lot of behavior. They have a good attitude, but oftentimes cross. So, how are you making sure that your staff are up to date with the types of selling techniques that resonate in your industry? And no doubt you are doing a lot.
Well, it comes back to the coach, train, and mentor. Uh, the other thing I will say is my experience is it's not one technique that works on every buyer.
Mhm.
So there are analytical buyers that need a different approach than um, outgoing buyers, and different people need different techniques. One thing we do is we share best practices. So having a salesperson share how they managed to sell those um, 5,000 air conditioners, bring another idea of a technique. Because what happens, we often fall back into behaviors of here is the one technique I always use.
Right.
And that, but you use a different technique.
Mhm.
Oh, maybe if I use that technique, sometimes it would be better. Or maybe if I made a combination of the two. So, what we like to do is continually polish our technique
Mhm.
um, to try to get it better and better over time.
And would you say that that's an ongoing task? It's not just, do this for a couple weeks, couple months, a year and be done with it. You're constantly reinforcing technique and updating technique.
Exactly. That's exactly what we do.
Yeah. Right. Makes sense. Cool. Thank you. All right. Well, let's see. As you look ahead for the next 12 to 24 months, what would you say, Jim, is the biggest growth or transformation opportunity that you see in your world? And what is the biggest risk? So, what's the biggest opportunity you foresee and the biggest risk when it comes to growing your business?
So the biggest opportunity I see for us is Danby has a very strong balance sheet, and because it's going to be hard sledding for a lot of companies, there is going to be an opportunity for us to likely buy one or more companies. That's the opportunity that
Hmm.
I see. The risk is we're selling in the economy just like these people
Yeah.
that we're buying that fell into hard times. So the risk for us is we could have more problems selling, and I worry about inflation risk is another. Consumers just will have not enough money to buy my products.
Right.
But
Absolutely. So, basically, what you're telling me is that you got a good balance sheet. Every all your ducks are in a row for that. But the economy, the tariffs and the economy, it is what it is. Like, not to say that it's an excuse, but if you're working in an industry that you're highly affected by tariffs and by inflation, that's just the reality, right?
that's right. And your listeners may have other competitive advantages.
Mhm,
So it doesn't matter what your competitive advantage is. Lean in on your advantage.
mhm,
Um, because they might be sitting there saying, "Oh, I've got a weak balance sheet." Yeah, you've got a weak balance sheet, but maybe you're smaller. That means you can be faster and you can be more
Mhm.
nimble. Or else they can say, "Maybe I'm too small." No, you're not too small. It means the big company doesn't even want to take that business because,
That's right.
as a matter of fact, if you came to me and had a $5,000 opportunity, like Justine, it's kind of like it doesn't move the needle for me. Like,
Right.
I mean, yes, I'll take the $5,000, but I can't get on a plane. I can't do much for that. Where someone else is going to say, "Oh, $100,000 piece of business is good." It's not good when
Exactly.
you're a multi-million dollar. So I actually like being the biggest distance size wise different from my competitors, because if you gave me a $5 million opportunity, if that for me is large, you'll get the A string,
Mhm.
and $5 million is big enough that my small competitors can't touch that because they don't have the
Mhm.
working capital, the size they have to be able to do 5 million. The big companies, um, they're doing 20 billion in sales. They don't care about a $5 million opportunity.
Awesome. So show up where you're needed.
Yeah.
Go where you're needed, right? Don't sit around places where everyone's happy or, maybe they have a problem. Like if you put yourself in a salesperson's or business owner's shoes, you can't help everyone, right? You're not a fit for everyone. You wish you were, but you're not. So go to where the people who have the problem that you can potentially help solve, go to them, right? And there's always opportunity, like, right? So just because you're not selling, I'm speaking to my viewers, just because you're not selling $5 million worth of product, there's companies and individuals that need doing smaller sales, but that's consistent. So go there and build it up from there. I really like that, and I hope I didn't butcher that, but that's kind of what I heard.
No, you got it.
Yeah, totally cool. All right. Now, how do you approach sales effectiveness training and development, both for yourself and for your team? What does that look like in your world? No doubt you have a robust sales leadership training where your ongoing reinforcement of the skills that are being learned, ongoing accountability. Senior managers are holding their staff accountable to sales behavior, and you're doing your coaching, your mentoring, and training, as you said. So, how are you, as specific as you can get, or maybe high level, how are you approaching that? What does that look like in your world?
Well, for me, I'm a constant learner and I encourage all my people to be constant learners.
Mhm.
One constant learning habit that I have is I always listen to audiobooks and podcasts when I'm in the car. And even though I don't drive major distances, every once in a while I do, but I get through a lot of material listening as opposed to reading. I also read, of course, but it's the attitude of being a constant learner, which I am myself. And then I share it with the team and I encourage my team to also be constant learners and to learn from each other. So we like to hold the example that, Mary just sold this. Well, great. How did Mary do that? Then if she can do
Right.
it with that client, we can probably do it with this client.
Right. And it blows my mind because, like, for those who went to, college or university, we spent years studying to get to a certain point. And we were able to get to that sort of certain point because of the years of studying and application. But once you get that piece of paper or that job you wanted, people just think that, okay, I'm done on the learning. But if you have that approach, how could you possibly continue to grow if you're not constantly upskilling and learning new tactics and learning more? How could you possibly improve? It never happened before. So why all of a sudden are we stopping our learning and our continuous training? And it doesn't have to be through a school system. It can be through podcasts or online training or mini courses or private training. So why do you think people stop their training? Why do you think they do that?
Well, part of it, society has created this situation. You got your degree. Here's your piece of paper. You're done,
Mhm.
and that is absolutely wrong. And the more the world is a changing world, the greater your degree is obsolete the sooner than it was in the past. And you need to embrace constant learning because if you don't, your competitors will, and the world will be changing. And if you don't change, you'll get left behind. So, I'm just a big believer that, well, the same thing is true in life. If I say that I've arrived, I've arrived. Well, if I've arrived, then I'm probably not doing anything. And you talk to me in 5 years, and I'm not going to be any further ahead because I feel I've arrived. It'll be the start of
Yeah.
my downfall.
That's right. That's right. And especially when it comes to selling, because the way that people sold in 1950 is drastically different than how they're selling in 2025 and 26. The way people sold 5 years ago is drastically different than people are selling in 2025. So, like there's buyers are changing, sellers are changing. So and if you're not up to date on the best techniques, behaviors, attitudes, then yeah, you're going to get steamrolled by your competitor, and it's no one's fault but yours. So sure, you can blame the economy. That is part of it. But at the end of the day, what can you control? You can control yourself. You could sit and say, oh, this person did that, or she did this, or the economy did this, or this circumstance was that. You can't control that. But what you can control is what you're doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, right?
That's right.
And whether it's engineering, whether it's technical training, selling, it's all the same thing. If you treat it like a soft skill, you're going to get very soft results. So, what would you say to someone who is hesitant about continuing their, professional development training, or is teetering on the cliff about whether they should continue upskill training themselves or not, or if it's worth the investment or not? What would you say to them?
I would say email or call Jim because I want to be in their business so I can put them out of business. I'm saying that in teasing, but basically,
Pretty much, right?
um, you're going to get left behind. You're going to get left behind, and your competitors are going to do it if you don't. It's a competitive world, regardless of what business you're in. And if you're not in a competitive business today, you will be tomorrow because other people are going to say, "Hey, that business has no competition. I should go into that business."
Yeah, definitely. So, when it comes to hiring salespeople, no doubt hiring salespeople is one of the hardest roles to fill, because they could look exceptional on paper on a resume. They can look amazing in an interview. But when they're actually hired and they're in a situation that might feel a bit uncomfortable, like, when the rubber hits the asphalt and they have to ask that question, they have to ask about money, they have to ask who are the decision makers. They have to find out what their problems are, the reasons for the customer's problems, the impact that this problem has. They have to ask for timelines. Um, Sometimes they don't, how they performed in the interview or on the resume, it is not at all what it looks like in real life. And for owners of companies who are hiring salespeople, a bad hire, as you may or may not know, we've definitely experienced this, can cost 3 times the bad hire's salary. Why? Because let's say 1 year of the salary you paid them for, and they didn't produce. Okay. Now you got to retrain another person. That's a third salary, right? And then, the second salary. And now the third salary is actually paying that other person to produce what you were hoping that salesperson who seemed very effective in paper and interview, you know, you got to do it all over again. So the cost of a bad hire is truly remarkable, especially when you're not using, third party data driven assessment tools to find out before you actually hire this person. Are they motivated to grow? Are they actually motivated to take direction? Like, you don't want to wait to hire them to find that out. Or B, are they facing any types of sales anxieties or call reluctance anxieties that we call, which happens to, a lot of people in a sales role. They may be, very smart, intelligent, hungry, motivated, but they're facing some type of sales anxiety where they're really uncomfortable, calling on someone that's not expecting to hear from them. So maybe in your training that you're doing with your sales teams, they're demonstrating that they're learning this material. But when it actually comes to the real, in the field where they actually have to ask questions that may be uncomfortable for them, they're not doing it, right? Now, a lot of people aren't able to find out this information before they hire, right? What are their skills gaps, right? If you could find this before you hire someone, that's probably something you're going to want to do, because gone are the days are where we can just depend on the resume or the interview, right? Because there's so many moving parts. You don't really know what someone's going to do until they're doing it, right? So, what are some of the greatest challenges that you've experienced? Maybe you haven't had any real challenges. Maybe you've kind of hit it out the park all along, but what are some of the greatest challenges that you've experienced so far when hiring salespeople?
Well, the challenge in any position is hiring someone who's a dud. I actually like it if they're a dud right away and you can figure it out. But the worst challenge is you hire someone and they're pretty good and you kind of like them and they kind of show up and they're not doing anything egregious. And they've been on
Mm,
payroll for 9 months and they're not
yep.
not delivering. Those are the worst. And it's really tough to avoid those, but there are some things that help. One is
Mm,
checking references, not
yep.
once, but twice and 3 times. That's
Yep.
one idea. Some people do testing is another way to do that. The other thing I always look at is someone's not performing. Sometimes it's us that's the problem. It could be our slotting. They're in the wrong position for them. Sometimes it's our training. Sometimes it's it's our coaching. It's our mentoring. Um, it's our onboarding. So we need to look at our own selves as to why people are not performing. Um,
Mhm.
but you're right. Wrong hires cost the company a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
Time is not your friend in business,
Nope.
primarily because overheads tick on.
Right.
So the overheads keep on spending. If you don't have the revenue to cover the overheads, and even if you do, you presumably hired people so they would deliver more revenue.
Yep.
Um, there's also a continuity issue with customers. And
Mhm.
customers don't like to call a company and say, "Is Justine there?" And she's not there anymore. And then Justine's replacement's not there anymore, and then the next person's not there
Yep.
anymore. Next thing you know, I have no relationship with the supplier. They're a non. They're just a company name and not a person. In the end, most people buy from people, and that's one reason why you can keep someone's business is because you like the person.
Totally. And, a lot of people may be listening to this, they may be thinking, "Oh, I'm not a salesperson. I'm introverted, or I'm too text forward. I don't know sales." But they may be incorrect in that assertion. So, I'd like to know, like, what in your mind, what is the most important thing that you're looking for when hiring salespeople? And how do you set them up for success? And really, do you agree with me? Do you agree with that notion that, there's a salespeople are born, or do you disagree? So, like, what are some things that you're looking for, and how do you set them up?
So I actually like introvert salespeople. And one of the reasons is salespeople are more successful if they listen than if they talk. And introverts tend to listen more than they talk. And
Mhm.
the, the most successful salespeople, in my experience, are ones that simply solve problems. And that's what
Mm,
we do. We solve customers' problems. And I actually do not want to sell you anything that you don't need. And it's not a sales jujitsu where I tricked you into buying something that you don't need. Rather, I'm helping you do something that you need to and want to do.
right.
And so it tends to be a almost a servant leader approach to sales
Totally.
is what we use.
Totally. Yeah. So, like, oftentimes, the traditional sales mentality is there's a couple traditional sales mentality that is not effective in today's market. Is, let me try to convince this prospect how great we are. Let me do a dog and pony show. Let me present you with all our features and benefits, how great we are, how much money you're going to save, how amazing it's going to be working with us. So, a lot of salespeople, they truly believe that features and benefits is what makes buyers buy. But in my world, what I've come to realize, it's got nothing to do with features and benefits. It's really comes down to finding out what, because if you talk about features and benefits of your product, you're basically self-serving mode. You're trying to convince them, and you truly believe that the more talk, the more words I say, kind of like what I'm doing right now, is going to convince someone. But you can't convince someone to do anything. And especially people don't like to be sold. They like to make the decision on their own. So, and what we're seeing now is what's more effective is rather than leading with features and benefits, it's leading with problems that you help solve. Talking about the problems that you help solve and how you go about helping them solve them, because that way when you talk to prospects and talk about the various problems that you help solve, they can tell you if they even have that problem or not, so that you don't sit around wasting time doing a dog and pony show, a features and benefits show, to someone that doesn't even have the problem that you help solve. So you just wasted all that time sitting down with a client or a prospect talking about features and benefits. And because you didn't even ask them about their problems, the reasons for that problems, the impacts, all that stuff, they're just basically sitting there listening to you go on and on and on about how great you are without even finding out anything about them. So, in that situation, no one really wins. So how do you set your team up for success so that they're leading with, the problems that they help solve rather than all the great things that they can do without even knowing if that prospect needs what you're talking about. Like, and that was a long lead on sentence, but is any of that relevant in your world? Do you find that leading with features and benefits, talking about how great you are, is or is not effective versus talking about the problems that you help solve and getting the buyer emotionally connected? Because if you talk about a problem, they'll be like, oh crap, I have that problem, versus we can help you save all this money and do all this blah, 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 blah. Like, what do you find works best in the types of selling that your team does?
Well, it's sort of like what you're saying. It's listening to the customers, and they will let you know what their issues are. And if you can solve their issues or their problems, then you get the order. And I agree completely, but not
Mhm.
selling until you know whether or not what you're selling is relevant.
Mhm. Totally. Because you could spend, and what we see, again, probably not what happens in your world, but we see is like salespeople will spend, again, all this time doing demos and, sales calls and educating the buyer, education, giving them more and more information, right? Without the buyer having to commit to anything. So oftentimes what salespeople do is they'll put together these quotes, these proposals, information, right? What information? What is it? It's valuable. They'll be handing it off to the buyer, right? Without the buyer having to commit to anything. So the buyer often ends up with this blueprint, literally a blueprint. And we're kind of going on to another topic here, but the buyer will end up with a blueprint of all the things you're going to do, exactly how you're going to do it, exactly how much it's going to cost. You're going to give that to them without them having to commit to anything. So what in our world, what we call that is free consulting. So you're giving highly valuable advice to someone who hasn't even committed to any next step. Not only does that take a lot of time, but it's the owners of the business are paying their salespeople to put these quotes and demos and proposals together. Maybe they have to involve the production team to put this quote together. Maybe they have to involve the technical team. So if you think of all the man hours that's these it takes to put these quotes, proposals, and demos together, but their closing ratios are not where they should be. Like, this is probably not for you, but for a lot of companies we work with, it's a massive overhead cost. It's a massive detriment. Um, do you see that in your world at all, or not really? You probably have a process to kind of fish that out.
So I do think many people jump to the demo too much, too soon. And many times the demo doesn't even need to be done. What people need to know is, what will the product do for me? I don't need to know how to do it. I just need to know that the product will do that for me.
Mhm.
Um, but and the other thing is, people need to know when to stop selling. So great, I
Mhm.
want to place the order. No, let me finish my pitch here.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
it's not what you do.
Yeah. So bottom line is like, don't waste, find out pretty quick. You'd probably want to find out pretty quick the probability of this deal going anywhere before you start to spend hours and time, money, and resources, a lot of expensive, it's very expensive to put these quotes and proposals together if they're not closing. So, and what people don't understand is they think that the more I talk, the more information I give, the more time I spend with this person, the more free information I give, that's what's going to lead the sale. But oftentimes it's not. You're just gonna get hosed for free information and not get any commitment whatsoever. And maybe the
That,
prospect will sound interested. Maybe they'll take that quote and ghost you, right?
that's right. And even worse, if you're giving them information that they don't want and don't care
Right.
about and adds
Totally.
no value, then you're
Yeah.
not even really giving them free consulting because it has no value for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
You're just annoying them at that point,
exactly.
right? Totally. Cool. Good points. Thank you. All right. So now let's and we're got a few more questions here, and these are my favorite questions. Um, Thinking about your own leadership. You, Jim, as a leader. What's been the hardest adjustment that you've had to make as your company has grown? No.
So as my company was growing, I would look at companies doing more than my company. So if I was doing 50 million, I look at people doing 100 million. I'm doing 100, look at people doing 500, look at people doing a billion. And what I learned is growth for me was not what more can I do, rather it's what less can I do. So what are
Mm,
the things I should not do to scale the business? And so I think a lot about scaling and trying to make sure I am not the bottleneck. Because if I'm the one that has to enter every order and ship every order and answer every question, then we're not a scalable business. So for me, it was about giving up. And when you're an entrepreneur and when you start was small, then it is hard giving up things and allowing other people to do certain things.
okay. So basically, is there an element of, kind of delegating tasks to other people so that you can focus on what you're really good at?
Yes, the more I can work in my unique ability, the more powerful I am, the more powerful the company is.
Mm,
And so, yes, it is delegating tasks, but what's more important, I believe, is delegating responsibility
mm,
because many times people will do it better than what I will do if I give them the latitude to be able to do it. And people, people prefer that as well. You don't want to tell people exactly what to do, to tell them the outcome that we want and how do they think is the best way to do it. It inspires people.
and that can be scary though for a lot of leaders, wouldn't you say? Trusting other people.
Oh yeah,
Mm,
yeah, giving up and trusting other people.
yeah,
It's definitely difficult. It's I'm the at this point in my life, I'm the opposite to a micromanager, and so it's the micromanager in us is what we have to get rid of in order to grow.
totally. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because, especially as a leader, it's not just about micromanaging. There's so many elements of being a leader, right? Like, such as some blind spots as a leader. Couple of things, not constantly recruiting or having someone to support with recruiting because you never know what's going to happen with your staff. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Not tying corporate goals to the salespeople's personal goals because your salespeople are not working so that they could grow. I'm sorry if I'm being kind of frank here, Jim, but they're not working to grow Danby. They're working to grow their bank account so that they can have more money, help their families live a better life, right? So a lot of times leaders, they think that their salespeople are just, and I don't assume that this is you at all, but they think that their salespeople are truly working to grow for the benefits of the owners of the company, and it's not. So, so for not fostering an environment where you're tying these salespeople's personal goals to the corporate goals, that can create a huge gap, especially with leaders. Um, you know, and also back to the concept of responsibility. Learn helplessness. This is a lot of people are learning to be helpless. And that there's a couple reasons, but it could be too much leadership intervention helping them, too much saving them when they should be learning it on their own, right? Or, oftentimes, and again, I don't think this is you, but they are, they're not focusing on training the management team. They're more so focused on training the salespeople, right? But it all starts from the managers. Because if the managers are not holding the salespeople accountable, right, like it falls off the tracks. So, there's so many parts. Like when people look at owners of companies, they think that they're doing everything. It's impossible, right? You have to be able to delegate and work together as a team. So, a lot of people how could I possibly grow to that level of where Jim is? Well, Jim Jim is a human being and he can only do so many things. Sure, he's doing a lot of great things, but he is still relying on his team to help put his vision into play. Right? Would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, in reality, I actually say I don't do anything. The team does everything. So the team is the key. The team's the one that does it for sure.
Yeah. With obviously a very strong leader and vision, right? That goes without saying. Alrighty. Well, one last question, if you may. And this is really important, and feel free to expand on this as much as possible because this is probably the most important question of today's discussion, at least in my opinion, and I think in our viewers' opinion as well, which is if you could give one piece of advice to an Ontario business owner now in today's day and age who's just hit a growth ceiling, what would that be?
Uh, my advice and suggestion is these are the worst of times always, and everything always gets better. At the same time, if what you're doing is not working, then don't keep doing it. Make
Mm,
some changes. So my suggestion is make some changes. Don't keep pounding your head against the same wall.
totally. I totally agree. Right? So and that includes like if you're not effectively planning for ongoing organizational change initiatives, you're stagnant because it's constantly evolving. So to stay in one place, it may be working now, but what are you going to do in the future? Right? What happens when that well runs dry?
That's right.
So basically from what I'm hearing is constantly evolve and constantly change. When you're comfortable, that's when you should be worried. I mean, I think there's a quote that Warren Buffett said, one of the most successful investors of our time is, when people are and this kind of is off topic, but when people this he said this is a famous quote. When people are greedy, be fearful. When people are fearful, be greedy.
Hmm.
And that means when people are fearful, there's a huge opportunity, right, for you to go. But when let's say your team is greedy and they're all comfortable and they're, eating their gravy and their potatoes and they're all happy and they're not doing anything about it, you may want to be a little worried
That's right.
because what happens when that well runs dry, right?
That's right.
Alrighty. Well, hey, that was an amazing discussion. I really appreciate your time. And I think this is going to be super useful for anyone in this industry. There's a lot of people that are breaking out in things that anything to do with home building, appliances, right? There's a lot of people, young people coming up in this industry, and they are thinking, I could never compete with these guys, or I could never get to Jim's stage. Why don't I just quit, right? But we're here to tell you that this started from selling computer boards out of his trunk. So it's got to start somewhere, right?
That's right. Everything starts somewhere. The advice is just do it.
Alrighty. Well, hey, I appreciate your time. It was a privilege to speak to you, and we'll be in touch then.
Great. Thanks.